Welcome to Geek Warning, the podcast that puts the world's most interesting cycling tech and more into one place. I'm Dave Rome, Senior Tech Editor for Escape Collective, and I'm joined by...
Ronan, Laughlin, Senior Tech Editor at Escape Collective.
And I'm Zach Edwards of the Boulder Groupetto.
Well, hello, everyone. Another episode, another week of tech. The classics are coming on strong at the moment, and as a result, we're starting to see some new tech on the roadside, or maybe it's not new tech. But we're starting to see some things happening there. A few little product releases have come our way and come the industry's way in the build-up to Sea Otter. We're starting to see a few get in there early. And obviously we have something on our minds. We even have a PSA this week, and the episode will end with a Ask a Wrench. Due to time zones, Brad Copeland will be on for Ask a Wrench, but Zach Edwards, you find yourself not in the USA at the moment. Where are you?
I am in sunny Girona, Spain.
Uh-huh. So, okay, how long are you there for?
About a month, so not at work.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
Solid stay, okay. It's a bit warmer there than home, I assume.
Yeah, I think it's snowing right now at home, so
yeah,
it's a bit different.
Okay. Enjoy. I hope you make it out to the Haribo Superstore.
Yeah, it's fun to ride past the factory because it smells lovely.
Nice. Yeah. All right. Well, let's get into some headline news. And Ronan, you've spotted some things that's happening in the build-up to the bigger classics. What have we seen?
I think everybody's seen it this weekend. It was kind of hard to miss. The major talking point was that Lidl, however it's pronounced, Lidl-Trek, were running a SRAM Red 1x Explorer group set. That's the new 13-speed with the full mount rear derailleur that works obviously with that Trek Madone that they're using because it's a UDH compatible rear end.
Yep.
And then, yeah, obviously a lot of speculation as to why they may or may not have been using said setup, of which I've got my own.
How many of the riders?
I think all of them.
I feel like I saw a couple with doubles, but maybe it was just on the women's side.
I mean, it was definitely, the likes of Mads Pedersen, Tom Scoins, the riders who I seen in the thick end of the action at OneUp Head Newsblad were riding this. So it wasn't some sort of marketing demonstration where we get one rider who's going to be doing a job earlier in the stage anyway and isn't going to be competing in the final to ride this thing that we want people to talk about. It was the bigger name riders who were using it.
Or was it a really big marketing demonstration?
Well, that is I don't know if teams still work that way, but I'm sure some do.
I mean, the entire bike race is marketing, right?
True. Got me there. Yeah, so I mean, this system has only one cassette size. It's a 10-46 tooth. What sort of size chainrings are we seeing matched up?
We were seeing a 54 chainring, and I think that's where it gets interesting because we have seen both Visma Lisa Bike and Lidl-Trek using the SRAM 1x setup previously, and especially at the likes of Roubaix where they can get away with a similarly sized or even bigger chainring because it's a mostly flat course. But we've seen Van Aert at Milan San Remo. We've seen Lidl-Trek in the past running 1x with the standard road 12-speed SRAM Red. But the 12-speed and the cassette limitations of that group set limit the front chainring size if you're riding anything other than a flat course. So something like Saturday's course with the Mur de Gerdsbergen and plenty of other cobbled climbs. I've done the Mur in a 54 1x chainring with a standard SRAM Red cassette. Kaylee has witnessed that, so it can be done, but it's probably not optimal. Whereas the new 13 cassette with the wider range of that cassette, it unlocks the option to use an even bigger front chainring. So I was kind of surprised it was only a 54 they went with. I'm not sure if that's frame clearance issue or what, but yeah, that's kind of potentially. I think that's a talking point here is that they're using that cassette range to sort of increase the front chainring size of a setup that they were sometimes already using.
I mean, that's the same reason you see gravel racers using the mountain bike cassette size so that they can use a bigger front chainring instead of the gravel drivetrain, right? Like it's the same, maintaining a low gear but having a bigger top end.
Yeah, so like why would you want to use a bigger chainring? There's a couple of reasons, but basically the bigger chainring forces you then also to use a bigger rear sprocket, so you end up with the same gear ratio. and combined those larger sprockets and chain rings will give you reduced chain tension, which should then give you a slight increase in drivetrain efficiency. And you just like also have lower articulation. The chain doesn't have to bend as much because the chain ring and the sprocket are larger. And so there's another drivetrain efficiency gain from that. There's also a noise gain here from a child crying in the background. I'm not sure if you can hear that or not, but
just sad not involved.
It's bedtime, so
yeah. Is it Ronan? Is she still riding 12-speed? Is that the problem?
He's on new shorter cranks. They're actually non-existent.
Oh, it's the newborn.
The shortest of all cranks.
Okay. So Ronan, I mean, this group set was initially released as a gravel group set. I mean, that's the Explore name. That's SRAM's gravel branding. It feels to me like this might be a good choice if there's cobbles or other risk of drop chains involved. What are you thinking? I
think that's the reason here. I mean, there's other potential gains. Like we talk about one by on time trialing and that giving you a better chain line. And that's because you can sort of figure out which sprockets you're going to use and then make sure that you're going to be having a straight chain line, which I don't think you get that gain in a random road racing scenario where you're up and down the cassette continually. And in fact, you might actually have more cross chaining because you've got such a big front chainring. And there's potential aero gains from dropping the front derailleur and dropping one of your two chain rings, but are they offset by having a larger chain ring and then a larger sprocket at the cassette at the rear and also a monstrous sized rear derailleur? Probably.
They had a guide too, which kind of negates the lack of a front derailleur.
Those guides are typically much smaller than a front derailleur, but yeah, you're losing some of that dropping the front derailleur gain, definitely. But I think there's a lot of speculation as to what the reason they might have written the setup was, and I think it's just that it's a couple of things. First of all, chain retention across the cobbles is definitely going to be better with a narrow wide one by chain ring and that chain catcher that Zach just mentioned. On top of that, the pros, even though there might be gains from like using your front derailleur to maintain a straighter chain line, pros don't change their front chain ring all that often, or they don't shift their front gear all that often. They will typically, it's not that it's wrong either, it's just in the racing scenario, it's not that efficient to be up and down chain rings continually and be even thinking about what your chain line's doing. You typically just keep it in the big chain ring unless you absolutely have to shift down to the smaller chain ring. And so if you're not going to be using it and the 1x option offers better chain retention, then why would you do a 2x option? Finally, I think one of the key gains is like coming into these steep climbs. Again, these guys maybe aren't even using their small chain rings, but if, let's say, they did need a small chain ring for those climbs, the chance of dropping your chain shifting to the small chain ring is greatly increased in those sort of high stress scenarios. And let's just say like SRAM's front shifting hasn't been as historically reliable as Shimano. I think that's maybe fair enough to say. And so, it's a reliability play rather than a marginal gain, I think.
I think too, like these races, there's always a good chance that you get caught up in a silly crash. And the lack of a derailleur hanger also means like a good chance of not having to do a bike swap.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't think it's looking too far into the crystal ball to imagine that SRAM will take this full mount system into the road in future. And yeah, I think the team are probably just preempting that, really. Like they're just taking the more durable path. Like you really can crash on these derailleurs, drive side down, jump back up. It's never going to be a problem. Like jokingly, and I'm sorry to... trying to remember what brand of bike it was on, but I'm sorry to whichever brand of bike I was using whenever I first started testing SRAM transmission, but people would ask me, is it really that strong? And I would just kick it, like proper kick the derailleur mid-ride, no cares, just knowing that it would be fine. Like it, as long you just have to be careful not to kick the actual cage assembly because that might be bad. But yeah, it really is a stronger system.
I've seen all those videos going around at that time, and the thing that would have impressed me, Dave, was if you had been able to stand on the derailleur and then actuate a shift and have the derailleur move you up and down. That would have been.
I'm not that light, Ronan.
If I may take the opportunity as well for a shameless plug, this week's performance process is all about concussions and why we should be taking them more seriously. And yeah, your bike might crash and be better able to survive, but maybe having a broken derailleur hanger is a nice way to slow us down and have us think about these things. I don't know. I'm trying to plug this.
But these races too can be chaos, right? It's not even like you crash. Someone can, like, the bunch kind of all bunches together and someone rear ends your bike and your derailleur's fine instead of being broken.
And like a specific example on that, I used to have a Pinarello F8 and it got destroyed in a bunch sprint without me even crashing, and that someone rode into my rear derailleur, ripped the rear derailleur off. The derailleur came round and went through the chainstay, and the force of all that ripped the front derailleur off the seat tube. And so the chainstay and the seat tube were completely destroyed, and I think I still rolled across the finish line without even stopping. So
right, like that's not going to happen.
That's not going to happen.
These derailleurs.
Yeah.
No. So yeah, I think it is. We're seeing the early signs of, I think, where SRAM will eventually head across its entire range, and I mean, we'll see if it works out for them. But certainly an interesting one. I initially looked at it when I was thinking kind of a skeptical view of like, oh, that's a nice marketing initiative. But the more you think about it, the more you think like there's actually really no obvious downside to this in this scenario, in this kind of race.
When SRAM released the latest group set, I was kind of surprised that they didn't do this already. Like, come out with 2 versions of the derailleur that are both compatible with the cassettes and chains and everything. And be like, if your bike has a UDH, here's your derailleur option. If it doesn't, here's the normal derailleur option. Like, that seems like something that I would have thought that they did.
I'm not sure there's no downsides, Dave. I think like some of the jumps in the cassette, I think the increased likelihood of even more cross chaining, which is the opposite of one of the benefits here. And like, if I have ran a similar setup, and I still think the optimal way to do this is, if you want to run a 1x setup optimally for road racing, it's a classified power shift integration into a system like this.
Yeah, I mean, the jumps in the cassette aren't present in the gears you'd be at going in high speed at, or in a sprint. Like, those jumps are the same as a more tightly spaced cassette. But yeah, I can't argue it at the larger end of the cassette. There are, those jumps do get pretty significant, say like heading up to the 46 tooth. Yeah, there's definitely jumps there. So yeah, okay. So no downsides, but fewer downsides than most would probably assume.
The jump size definitely seems to bother some people more than others. Like, some people don't mind at all. Other people, like, this drives me mad. I can't find the right size that I want, like, constantly in between gears. But
yeah. All right. Well, let's move on, because it's not the only new thing we spotted from SRAM. We actually spotted something that is actually new. It looks like there's some new tubeless wheels coming from Zipp that have what appear to be a pressure sensor built into the rim shape. So Zipp have previously had their Tyre, which is a brand that they actually acquired quite a few years ago. They've had that as an optional accessory, and some of their wheels even came stock with it, where it sort of sits in line to the valve, the tubeless valve. But this one looks like it's actually integral into the wheel. It is, basically built into the rim. What do we think? It looks like a new wheel set.
I'm going to sit out this conversation and listen to what you guys have to say, and then I'll give you my take at the end, because I think it's maybe different than what's different what I've seen elsewhere.
I feel like I know Ronan's take, and it is not of optimism.
No.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know anything about these wheels. I'm going to assume they're still hookless. I'm going to assume they're at least 25mm internal width, maybe wider. I don't know. I don't necessarily think that would make a whole lot of sense for a pure road application, but
I mean, it looked like a new 303 type depth, right?
So. Yeah. So, I mean, it's, the big thing here is that pressure sensor that we're seeing. I think some people love them. I think other people just ignore them and let the batteries die and then forget that they're there. So, I don't know. Another feature to sell on.
I just don't understand the point of a pressure sensor. Like, what is it doing that me pumping my tires up before the ride isn't already doing?
Well, I think there's a few things here. One, a lot of people don't have a good gauge. They're probably using their 20-year-old or 15-year-old toe peak analog gauge that came on their floor pump that they bought when they first got into cycling. I think there's that, and I think the other element that I think it's the selling point is pressure variance while you ride. So you can have the data on your
But like if
on
my
your head
tire
unit and
if
you
my
can
tire
see.
goes flat, I don't need a notification that my tire is going flat. Like you can feel
No,
that
you
you're-
don't. But I think some customers may not be fully alert that they've got a slow leak. I think you've got probably a very good feel that you could tell when you lost 10 psi, and you'd probably know it because your face is covered in sealant. But I think, or the person behind you is complaining that they're getting covered in sealant.
Right.
But I think, some people are somewhat more oblivious to this, and I think that's the sell. But Ronan, I'm keen to hear your thoughts on this.
Before I give you my thoughts, Dave, do you have any idea of the accuracy of these? Like the tire was, I have the SKS Air Spy, and I bought those when I was preparing for the Everesting with the intention of not identifying slow leaks, but sort of monitoring how my tire pressure would creep up starting early morning cold conditions into a warmer day. And they have since sat in a drawer in my workshop and not been used. But yeah, the accuracy, like, are they more accurate than a pump gauge?
Not necessarily. I think some of them claim like 0.5% resolution, but I think they're typically they tend to hit roughly within 1 psi range of repeatability. So they're pretty good. Like most gauges that people are using, most digital gauges would probably be in that vicinity. So I think they're competitive in that regard, and I think they're good enough for the application.
And so, like, you were talking about pressure losses and the sensor identifying a pressure loss. I either skeptically, tin hatly, or otherwise think this may well be what I'm going to call a hookless overinflation warning device, in that hookless rims have a tire pressure limit. That one of the main concerns that I've had and that I've put to Zipp in the past is, how do you ensure the end user who isn't aware of the limitations of hookless and tire pressures becomes aware of those limitations? And I give the example of when I worked in a Ford dealership, we sold a petrol car. It comes with a thing called Ford's Easy Fuel, and that you just simply cannot fit a diesel nozzle into a petrol car. Or maybe it's the other way around, but one of those ones, you just can't make the mistake. And there, when I put that to them last year, there wasn't really an answer, but I kind of see this as potentially being the answer. If you either overinflate while you're pumping the tire up and go above that 72 psi limit for a 28 tire on a TSS rim,
maybe it flashes right at you.
Maybe it warns you. Or if you're in the same thing, you pump it up in a cold basement and then you go out into a very warm summer day, somewhere like where you live, Dave, and the pressure is rising. Although how much that pressure rises is debatable, but this could answer it. If you do get over that limit, it could serve as a warning also. So yeah, I kind of think it'll be sold to us as a tire pressure sensor. Why you would include a tire pressure sensor which will inevitably add weight and, scalloping out that cavity in the rim and reinforcing that, presumably isn't just as light as making the rest of the rim. And so why you're doing that when we're trying to save weight on wheels and also make them more aerodynamic at the same time, I don't really know.
I think you're onto something. Yeah, I think there is probably a huge safety component, and it is one way that they can add a selling feature while helping to ensure the wheels remain safe. And I would say current wheels do have a warning system built into them. If you overpressure them, they explode. But maybe getting
explode.
a red warning light before that happens, it's probably better.
And I'm presuming this is going to connect to head units as well, and so you get a flashing on your head unit and all sorts. Like it. I quite like the idea. If those SKS Air Spy sensors I have were just better, I probably would still use them. Just because I'm more data that I probably won't do anything with, but it's nice to see. Just a nerd for all that kind of stuff. So I'm not opposed to the idea, but I don't think it will be. Or I don't think it's entirely just a tire pressure sensor.
Yeah, I also think integrations like the Karoo will be excellent, right? I think other head units will support it, but I think there'll probably be some cool things with the Karoo in terms of pressure monitoring and all that puts it in a pretty obvious spot, and maybe has it as a pop-up when you have changes or whatever, unexpected changes in pressure. So But yeah, one to watch.
If we think about how the rest of the SRAM Axis app works, the likelihood is you connect these to the Axis app and they automatically connect to your Karoo. Whereas one of the issues I have with the SKS ones is that you have to get a Connect IQ app on a Garmin, and yeah, it's just a bit of a faff. Yeah. So I imagine this will be a much simpler solution.
For the people that are fully invested in the ecosystem, I would imagine so, yes.
From like a team point of view, Pidcock racing names seems like a logistical nightmare to keep everyone's wheels paired to the right head unit.
Again, if they're using the app,
because it's in the wheels, and the wheels don't belong to a single bike. Yeah, that's Zach's point. Yeah, I mean, the wheels are... Teams just swap and change wheels without names on them all the time.
Dave, are you saying that the wheels on the truck go round and round?
The wheels on the team bus go round and round.
The wheels in the team truck go round and round.
Okay.
They're definitely
anyway... All right, so yeah, clearly SRAM and Zipp have some things happening, and those Zipp wheels, I guess we'll see when that comes out. I am most keen to see how they go about balancing those wheels, because I can only imagine there's extra weight in one end of it, but I'm sure they're on top of that. Ronan, once again, you've got something on your mind this week that you've brought to the table, which is that you've noticed while writing a review that it feels like you've been writing somehow from before this bike even came out. It's been years, it feels like.
It has actually been years. 3 years to be precise.
Properly foiled by it. And that's an excellent pun, by the way. I mean, this bike that you're looking through the geometry chart, and you notice that they didn't really call out fork rake on the bike. So without fork rake, you can't really work out the trail figure. Trail figure is a pretty good number to give people to give a basic understanding of how quick the bike handles. I guess Zach and I kind of called you a little, we said you were wrong on this, and then the more we looked into it, we were like, oh wow, like a lot of European brands don't mention either fork rake or trail or both. And so you've got a point. Why don't more brands mention fork rake and trail?
Yeah, and you've kind of, that's exactly what was on my mind. But I think it's even going a level deeper than that. Like, we quite often will get the fork rake figure. And why do you want to know the fork rake figure? So that you can then go away and calculate the trail. So why don't brands just give us the trail in the first place? And, the right question there might be, well, why do we even care what the trail is? But for me, I think the trail is the one part of the geometry chart you can look at. The rest of the geometry chart sort of gives you an idea as to how you're going to fit on a frame. Whereas things like the wheelbase and the trail will sort of tell you how this bike is going to feel. To the point that I kind of most often won't look at these figures until after I've ridden the bike, so it doesn't influence my feeling on the bike. But for someone if I was looking to buy a bike, I would definitely want to know what the trail is, because that's going to tell me how this bike feels to handle. And, I know which type of bike I like. And so it might actually eliminate a bike from my consideration, based on whatever the trail figure is. Typically if we're talking road performance bike, I like something around 57, 58. If it's in the high 60s, and which is unlikely to be, but if it was, that's going to tell me I don't like this. If it's mid 50s, then it's going to be a sharper handling bike. If it's low 50s, then it's a Abu Japarov's custom-made sprinting bike from the 1990 Tour de France. Like the non-inclusion of the trail was already frustrating enough, and now I'm starting to realize that actually there are brands that are not even giving us the fork rake so that then I can go away and calculate the trail. And I don't understand why
it is surprising how many bike reviews I do that I actually have to ask for the fork rake numbers. And I think, Zach, you made a comment that it seems like the ones that keep it quiet are the ones that aren't doing differing fork rakes. They might just do one single fork rake.
That's kind of what it seemed like. Like most companies that do different fork rakes for different sizes kind of advertise that as like, look, we care about every size. Yeah. And the ones that don't do that just kind of like hope people don't look too into the numbers.
Don't ask. Yeah. Yeah, I think there's probably an element of truth in that. But I think there's more to this. Like, there's some detail in it, which is like, even the trail figure, if they give it to you, there's still the question mark over like what tire size that is for, and whether that's applicable to you. The bigger the tire, the bigger the tire size, basically the higher the trail figure will be. The bigger the wheel diameter, the trail number increases, so it'll slow down the handling. But yeah, that's another reason that we want the fork rake to match up to the head tube angle, so we can figure it out ourselves based on a tire width that we think is applicable to the bike. So,
and to Zach's point there, I think that is key, in that if a brand is offering a single fork rake for the entire size range, then the bikes at the outer extremes of their sizing range are going to handle very, very differently, but they're sold to the consumer as the same bike. And for those, even in the middle, it could be, I know Pinarello introduced some new fork offsets for the Dogma last year. I can't remember exactly what they were, but it brought my size in line with what I wanted. But for someone like Alvin over outside, I know it didn't really bring the bike to where he wanted it to be. And so that does make a big difference. And yeah, like, I kind of wonder if part of it is like, this trail applies with a 28mm tire, or if we're talking about a gravel bike, it applies with a 40mm tire. But then with the way, especially that gravel is going, with a huge tire size variation that you get on a single bike, depending on what the customer decides to put on that bike, then that's going to greatly affect the bike as well. Maybe manufacturers just don't want to be holding to, you said it has this trail, and actually it handles very differently, or I don't know, because that, at the end of the day, that's an end user adaptation to the bike that the brand can't be responsible for.
I mean, but I would say too, like, most end users don't know what a trail or fork rake figure is, let alone what it means and what it does to the handling of a bicycle. Like, most people don't even look at geometry, right? They're just like, go to the bike shop, that's the one. I know I'm a 56. They don't look at the stack and reach. They don't look at anything else. They're just like, that's the one. And there are also, I think, a lot of people that don't even look at, like, stack and reach. We've all kind of accepted that that's like a really good way to see if a bike fits. And people are still looking at like, oh, I'd ride a top tube length of this size, when that doesn't really mean anything. Let alone like, knowing what fork rake means. But that's not really a reason why not to put it in your geo chart. But I think that there is definitely a lack of education on this front.
But I think that education starts with brands more and more giving those numbers, and perhaps giving a hyperlink to an easy to understand, video or something that explains what these numbers mean. I mean, we ourselves on Escape, like Rob English wrote a pretty good article in the past for us under the Whys of Bike Tech series, which explains trail and why it's so important, and how you can use that number to get an idea of how the bike will handle. It's not the be all end all. Like, there are other nuances that will affect how quick a bike handles, like your weight distribution and like stem length and all these other factors play into it. But it is still a pretty important number when you're looking at a geometry chart. So good point, Ronan. We want more brands to offer it.
We should link to that in the show description for anybody who wants to know what trail is. But briefly, it's basically a combination of head tube angle and fork rake. If you imagine drawing a straight line through your steerer tube to the ground, and then dropping a straight line from your front hub, that front hub straight line is going to trail behind the line coming from the fork steerer. And that's the greater the trail behind, the more stable, let's say, the handling, and the shallower the trail behind, the snappier, quicker the handling.
It applies to shopping cart trolley wheels as well.
Yes. I was going to say, you said that you don't look at the figures until after you've tested the bike. Have you ever been
I'm the same.
Very surprised in one direction or the other? Or are you kind of like, okay, this bike, like, you're in the ballpark of what you think it is?
I think the only bike that ever surprised me was the BMC Team Machine R, which off the top of my head is like 61 or 62.
BMC sits at about 62.
Yeah, and that didn't... it didn't handle like I expected. It was much... I enjoyed it much more than I expected I was going to. But I would say I can typically sort of predict what trail figure is going to be based on riding. And like that, I think that's okay. Whereas looking at a geometry chart and seeing it's 57 and then going out and having that feeling,
it's confirmation bias.
I'd
say for me, I try not to look at geometry charts, and me feeling the times that I feel really at odds with a geometry chart tends to have me pulling out like the digital angle finders and all sorts of things, trying to figure out whether the geometry of the actual bike I have matches what they claim it to be. And then it can be quite the rabbit hole when the numbers don't align to what you feel. So anyway, doesn't happen that often, but it does exist. So anyway, more brands, please add your fork rakes. And
no. Just give us the trail. We don't want the fork offset. We don't care about the fork. The only reason we get the fork offset is to calculate the trail. Rake. Why? What do you want that for?
I don't know. Okay, well, give us the trail figure, but tell us what tire size it's based on.
Yes. Oh, sorry, that's why you would want it, because if you're going to change tires, you want to be able to work out the change and trails. So we need both. We need both all the time. Always.
Yes. Just give us all the info. Yeah. All right. And it's definitely more on the road side that I think we are asking for. I think Mountain Bike World does this pretty well already because they tell you the offset in like the specifications of the fork, and you've got the head angle so you can figure it out yourself. But drop bar bikes, tell us these things. So it helps. All right, well let's move on. We haven't had a PSA for a little while, and I have a PSA, which is I've noticed, and you can hear it when people descend past you. Say you're climbing and they're coming down, and in Sydney, a lot of our road descents tend to have less than perfect roads, so you hear this. But the clanging and cluttering of people's saddlebags and items that they carry. It seems like a lot of people stress out about like not having a chain squeak and getting rid of rattles, and then just are quite happy to have like CO2 cartridges flapping around and smacking into the back of their seat posts. So, that's my PSA. It's more a question of what's wrong with people that do this.
Is the PSA not supposed to be a public service announcement? This just seems like Dave's opportunity to
berate people. Yeah.
But,
so I mean, for me, like if I were servicing a bike, and this might shock some people, maybe other mechanics do it, but I do the drop test to hear any noises, and if someone's mini pump were rattling or if someone's saddlebag were rattling, I would actually go into the contents of that and fix that noise for them. Like I would put elastic bands around the CO2 canisters and make sure those aren't smacking into each other. Vice versa, maybe put the tube in a place where it's protecting things from moving around, or put some tape on the mini pump to stop that from rattling. Am I alone on this, Zach? Do you do this?
Sometimes. I mean, some saddlebags you do the drop test and it sounds like it's just full of loose change. Like, what is going on here? Like, how do you even ride this without
it is loose change.
Like wanting to throw it in the ditch? Like, it's so annoying. And maybe more people just ride with headphones than you think, but
maybe
like it just seems like the bigger the saddlebag, the more likely it is to be very rattly.
Yes. So that is a golden rule. Yeah. So I think there's a few things here. So the PSA is do the drop test. Just drop your bike like pick it up an inch and drop it onto the ground, and it should feel relatively silent. You might hear a bit of like a clack from the chain bouncing, but it shouldn't be much other noise beyond that. If you are hearing rattles, then start taking accessories off your bike until the rattle goes away, and so you can isolate what it was. And I think you'd be surprised. Like I've seen even saddlebags that are really well packed, like say like a Silka tool roll. I know they can have it just enough flex and bounce in them that they could smack into the seat post. So it can take a little clever packing.
What would annoy me worse than the rattle is not just the drop test, but if you move the bike side to side and the saddlebag just sways about.
Yes.
Like I don't know how anyone could possibly ride with a bike with that doing that.
Yeah.
But cinch it down.
Have I ever, Dave, told you about my magnet on a multi-tool trick?
You have told me about the magnet on the multi-tool. I'm convinced it does nothing, but go on.
I've found a better solution, and that's the Pirelli tyre bands that come on the tires that seem very wasteful. But no, actually it's not a better one because I have to remove it every time I want to use multi-tool multiple times per ride. But anyway,
some multi-tools give you those bands, like Lezyne and Crank Brothers come with those bands already on them. But
that could help with just rattles as well, the magnet. I'm determined to find a use case for this.
Yes. I have a little random tip, which is often the rattle, in my experience, if you have CO2, is the result of your CO2 head being separate to your CO2 canister and that they clang together. And I have found it took me 2 decades of my life to figure this out, and I'm kind of ashamed to say that it took me so long. But all you need is like a 1 centimeter long piece of tubing that fits over the CO2 canister, and you can basically put that on over your CO2 canister, and you want it maybe longer than 1 centimeter, maybe 2 or 3 centimeters. You want it long enough that the CO2 head can thread onto the canister, but not bottom out onto the pin that punctures it. And
Specialized used to include this with their CO2 stuff.
They include something very similar, yes. So,
like clear.
Yeah, it's just, if you got a 3D printer, it's a very, very quick thing to print. Otherwise, you can go to a hardware store and just buy yourself a suitable piece of like clear tubing. Would do the same thing, but a very simple hack to allow you to tighten your CO2 head onto your canister without puncturing it. So there you go. It's
I think too, like in your saddlebag, if there's room for things to rattle around, just put like an extra CO2 cartridge in there or put something to like take up space so things don't have room to rattle.
Yeah. So I've been known to put like a rag in there, or elastic bands are good for this. But
most tubes come with elastic bands as well, and you can just like whatever you're storing in there, use that elastic band to attach it to the tube. That's kind of what I usually do.
Exactly. Exactly. So and also like the type of saddlebag you use is important here. Like ones that allow you to actually cinch down the saddlebag into the saddle are good. And I mean, I've really come to like saddlebags that use like ski straps, like volar strap kind of attachment. There's quite a few brands that do them now, like Oro Case and Velo Color, I think, is another one. And I love them. They're like very simple way to stop your saddlebag from making any noise. So,
and if you have an expandable saddlebag, then stop riding. This is a stop ride notice from Escape Collective. Those will rattle. I mean, Dave, you're hesitating, but those, like, if you've got a rattle coming from your saddlebag and you're using an expandable saddlebag that doesn't like compress fully, and especially if it's got like a hard lining interior or something.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, from saddlebags and noises, let's move on to some quick tech bites. We've got some new things that have happened over the last week. Top of the list, Continental have released a new Gran Prix TR tyre. There's also clincher versions, but it seems the headlines are all related to the TR tyre. For a little bit of a reminder, the Gran Prix is not the GP5000. It's a lower end model. They actually manufacture this one in their facility in China. But it's using the same rubber compound, same width options. It's almost the same. It's 25mm through to 32mm options, and it's 4 layers of casing versus the GP5000's 3 layers of casings. What we don't have is how it compares to the newer GP5000 STRAS, which is like the all-condition, all-seasons tire, which has 4 layers of casing material. And now I'm confusing myself. It's 12 euros less than a GP5000 STR, I think, is the main thing to know. So still a premium tire, but certainly not as astronomically priced as the top-end thing. Ronan, are you getting any to test?
I've been offered them, but I've got quite a lot of tire testing at the moment, so I've had to say thanks, but no thanks in that particular example. With a note to come back to them.
Gotcha. 12 euros. Is that enough of a difference per tire to? I mean,
I don't really think it is sell? Because like the GP5000 STR is. I was reminded of this at the weekend. I would typically use the STR or Pirelli's new P0 TL or RS, few other tires, but particularly the GP5000 has been a go-to for me for some of these events that I do because they can. It's just reliable, and it is also known to be one of the fastest options you can get, especially on our roads at this time of year. Punctures are definitely a thing, and with the GP5000, I can't recall the last puncture I had. I went out in the Vittoria Corsa Speed at the weekend, which is, an outright time trial tire, and punctured on the first ride. They're so thin, but I punctured on the first ride, and it just reminded me, like, yeah, like the STR has I think this could well change, but until now it has been the benchmark. And for €12, I wouldn't be sacrificing. I think maybe this new tire is more reliable, but it's probably also slower, and so I wouldn't be. I don't think the sacrifice is enough there.
Yeah, I think what we're waiting to hear is just exactly how it compares to like that GP5000 STR AS. I think is probably going to be.
Isn't that one's even more expensive than the normal 5,000, right?
It could be, yeah.
So this is maybe probably more than 12 cheaper.
And I mean, like the example I give was the Vittoria Corsa Speed, which is a time trial tire, but reportedly Ineos did the entire Tour de France 2 years ago on the GP5000 TT TR, so the time trial version of that GP5000 without a single puncture. And
which that tire's like significantly thicker than the Corsa Speed.
It is.
Like, just like feeling wise, it feels like twice as thick.
But like it's debatable whether it's faster or slower.
Right.
Yeah, the Corsa maybe has lower rolling resistance, but it's maybe not as aero. And so like while that debate is there, and the Corsa Speed isn't even an option for me. It's like, and I've raced and literally ridden the length of Ireland on a TT TR without issue. Yeah. I used TT TR.
The Corsa Speed feels like if you're riding it anywhere other than like a closed swept course, it is not a good option.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that comes from someone that used to ride S-Works turbo tires, the 320 TPI ones on gravel. So that's saying something.
Who's that?
You.
Me? Oh, no, I've never ridden the turbos.
Oh, I thought they were your tire of choice around Boulder.
No, that was Kaylee. I liked the Vittoria version.
Oh, it's Kaylee. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I would ride the normal, like, Corsa controls all the time.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I guess the other thing to add on this, in the past, the Gran Prix tire always felt to me like more of an OE play. It was the sort of tire you'd see on complete bike stocking Continental tires, and normally while on the shelves you'd find the more premium German-made GP4000 or the new GP5000 now. So and all that said, I find the naming really confusing because GP is short for Grand Prix, so it's or long for Grand Prix, should I say?
But you see the GP 5000 is quicker, so they shorten it.
Gotcha. Quicker to say, quicker to ride. Okay. All right. Well, let's move on. OneUp. We recently spoke about them on the podcast for having a new clip pedal. It was more of a trail pedal, but they clearly have their sights set on expanding that range and getting into clip pedals. They'd been doing flat pedals for a long time. It looked really promising. It came with claims of having a much more retained feel versus like a Shimano SPD mountain bike pedal without, more similar in feel to like a road pedal with less float. But it sounds like it might have had too much of a retained feel because they've got a revision coming out in a few weeks. They've had to stop selling them. They've asked people to stop riding them. It sounds like people couldn't get out of them. So including our own Josh Weinberg, who has been testing them and did topple over in them, stuck in them.
Has he got out?
From what I hear, he's still in a ditch. So thoughts with him. But so anyway, that's one to watch. I'd be keen to see how the pedals feel after the update, but they're actively working on it. And I would say while not getting the design perfectly right the first time around is not great, but kudos to OneUp for like being very public and coming out and being like, hey, our new pedals, we didn't quite get them right. We're coming out with an update. Please stay tuned. I think that's a better approach than just pretending there's no issue and then quietly updating the product as others in the industry have done. So yeah, not much more to add on that one, I guess. Speaking of things that perhaps weren't quite right the first time around, Industry 9, their Hydra hub, it's a mountain bike hub that had some crazy engagement points, 690 points of engagement via like this sort of phased pull system where one pull would engage and then kind of things would flex a little bit in order to engage further pulls. They're updating the hub. They've got a wholly revised and overhauled Hydra 2 hub coming out, and by the time you're reading this, you can read a full breakdown, full review, sort of technical comparison on what is new and why from Josh Weinberg on Escape. We'll have the review live. But that brings up my question to you, Zach. You would have seen a few Hydra hubs through your shop. Did you find they lasted?
No, they didn't. I'd say I've not seen any like catastrophic failures where the axles have snapped, which I know other people have experienced that.
Yep, that was an issue. Yep.
But they seem to go through bearings faster than basically any other hub on the market. So hopefully they fix that. Yeah, they're just using like a standard enduro bearing in there.
Yep.
So
they've really changed a lot of things. Like the axle's completely different. Their sealing system is different now. They're using larger bearings, which are equal left to right in size. They've even changed how the hub preloads, so it's no longer like axially loaded. It's now like toleranced radially onto the bearing, I guess, which is more of like in a sense, more like how DT Swiss have always done their hubs. So yeah, a lot of technical stuff. I will just point you towards Escape's article or Josh's article on Escape. But Zach,
do the pawls still on the new one engage via flex from the system?
It seems so, and they've increased the size of the pawl pockets and increased the number of teeth on the drive ring. So in case 690 points of engagement weren't enough for you, you're now getting over 800.
Sweet, I guess.
Yeah. You can tell in my voice that I'm very excited by this thing that makes no difference at all to how a bike rides. I'm strongly of the opinion that once you go over like, heck, even 72, it starts to be like a negligible advantage to the bike.
Yeah,
I don't know. What's your take on that one?
I feel like what's DT's a 54? They're high, like that's
the high end.
You don't need more than that. Like the 36 is plenty. I don't know. I've never
36 is plenty. 36 feels slow after you've been on like 100 and something engagement points. But I think like once you're up,
does it make a difference?
Maybe if you're doing like some trials maneuvers, maybe if you're like going back and forth between the hubs, but you quickly get used to it. And I think on the clock, it wouldn't make a difference.
Yeah. Theoretically, it would still be faster because there's less drag when you're coasting.
And I think that's the thing is theoretically fewer points of engagement tend to be faster because it's less friction. So there's some clever ways around that. There's some clever disengaging systems around or one-way bearings. But I think, I don't know. I really hope that people aren't buying these hubs based on them having 800 points of engagement. Buy them for the pretty colors, buy them for other reasons. But yeah, I really feel like anything beyond 100-ish is, in the point of diminishing returns. So, but each of their own.
They make fun noises.
They do. So yeah. Anyway, check out the full review on Escape. I know Josh had a couple of months of use on these hubs, and yeah, it's a whole wheel set, but he's really focused on what's new in the hubs, and I think it's quite a fun little like engineering report. So, all right, it feels like it's a pretty heavy SRAM episode. So we've got two more pieces out of the House of SRAM. One is Velocio, the clothing brand they now own. They have gotten into the hydration pack game.
I mean, it looks like hydration pack that's very high on your shoulders.
It does exactly what Zach just said. It looks very high on the shoulders. So it's a very lightweight mesh-based hydration pack that comes with a 1.5 liter bladder. It can fit up to a 2 liter bladder. It's for the gravel racing. But yeah, every photo we've seen makes it look like it's just like right up against the neck. So it's been a while since I've used a racing hydration pack. I used to use them all the time, but yeah, I don't know. They used to annoy me if they got too close to my neck, especially when you're descending. So yeah, I don't know. Hopefully that's not a problem.
Especially with an aero helmet.
I think that's a benefit. And yeah, I guess it's worth stating, like it's so high up on your body because it's designed to still give you access to your jersey pockets. So it sits above the jersey pockets,
which is nice.
Which is like yeah, I understand the idea there, but like if you're constantly feeling it every time you're descending, which I hope you're not, then that would be annoying. But
I guess like the annoying while descending is usually more like a mountain bike thing. You're going down a technical rocky descent or something, and it kind of like bounces up and hits you in the back of the head. But gravel descents are usually not that technical
or steep. Yeah. So I'm sure I'll give Velocio the benefit of the doubt here. Everything I've used from them has been rather good or almost often excellent. So I'm sure they've done their work on this. But yeah, the photos did look a little close for comfort. So anyway, perhaps one we'll have a review on in the future. And lucky last is the Hammerhead Karoo has got its own app store, basically. Ronan, do you have the details on this?
Yeah, they've announced a native extension library to the Karoo cycling computers that allows you to install and use third-party apps directly on the Karoo devices. So, if we think back that the Karoo is sort of based on Android, this was always one of the sort of, if I remember rightly, this has always been one of the major potential promises around the Karoo that never really came to fruition, and seems like it might be about
It's always been possible, but difficult to do. Like, you could always sideload apps on, but it required doing funny things in a PC and perhaps compromising the intended functionality in order to have these apps sit on there. Like, I know GP Llama jokingly installed Zwift onto his Karoo and went Zwifting outside with the thing. But yeah, it comes at the cost of being able to use it with its the normal ride screen. So I think it's cool. Yeah.
That's kind of what we have to wait and see, is how easy this is to use. How does it affect the rest of the experience? But having not tried a Karoo, and somewhat famously at this point being pretty disillusioned with all the other options on the market, I'm quite tempted. This has me tempted to try a Karoo now, because one of the things that was locking me into Garmin was the Connect IQ app store, and this seems like a direct competitor to that. And I mean, the press release that's come out around this has said that as of March 6th, the Karoo will now have the option to have the Epic Ride Weather Ghibli Tech, which is an aero or drag measurement system. Their app is going to be on there. H-Drop Hydration, My Windsock, a couple of others are all going to be available on that as of March 6th, which hopefully is before you're listening to this podcast. Otherwise, we've broken an embargo. But yeah, I think it's interesting.
I have to say, when the Karoo 2 first got presented to me, I thought, it's cool, it works well, but why would I want this over a Garmin? Or why, who's going to spend the money on this versus a Garmin or Wahoo? It didn't feel like it did enough. And then they presented the Karoo 3, or just what they call now the Karoo, and it kind of felt like this computer that a lot of its features were promoting easy syncing and easy functionality with SRAM Axis system, and it did that really well, but that also felt like a really limited selling pitch. But the more issues you continually have with Garmin related products, Ronan,
not just Garmin,
the more I'm starting, not just Garmin, but the more issues you keep talking about and I see in the place, and the more updates that Karoo keeps doing, longer battery life they recently did, and then this, the more I'm starting to think that there's something to SRAM's investment here. They might be onto something. There could actually be a gap in the market after all. So,
have you ever had a device send yourself, your wife, and your mum 262 emails alerting them of your whereabouts within a 2-hour ride? 200. So that's that's a lot of emails circulating about there.
Were they on the edge?
That's what I was on an edge.
Okay.
That's what happened on Sunday. During which time the device also decided that me stopping at a junction, me stopping at a red light, and me stopping for a nature break. Sorry, not a red light, a puncture. Those three scenarios were for some reason the device decided that I had crashed. Refused to let me cancel the crash alert, and then sent them a notification that I crashed, and also ended that ride and saved it. So I have 3 ride files to make up for the single ride that I did on Sunday. So
is it worth noting that this also isn't the big 1030 that you've written about? This is their simplest unit that came highly recommended from people that are like, oh, this is flawless.
This is a 130 plus that I've maybe used it 5 or 6 times since I bought it.
Yeah.
And yeah, the title of the article that I was considering writing was the Garmin that cried wolf, because the next time one of my devices does actually alert a loved one that I have actually crashed, they're likely to ignore it at this point.
It does not sound like technology loves you, Ronan. Even when you try to keep things simple.
Gone out of the way to keep it simple this time. It had power, time, heart rate, cadence, the things that I think we need to expect head units to be able to do. Yeah. And even after turning off the notifications and the alerts and the tracking mid-ride, it still kept doing these. Anyway, it could have been a firmware mismatch, so I didn't.
You haven't tried doing an Everest on this computer, have you?
Well, I mean,
because if I were a computer and you did an Everest with me, I too would quit.
Well, I mean, like it may be, it may be funny that these things keep happening to me, but it's legitimate. If you had trained for an Everesting and you're going to do one, or an Ironman, or a big sportive, or whatever it is, and your head unit crashed mid-ride or lost the file for whatever reason, that's a genuine concern that everybody has. It shouldn't.
You would use this head unit that you're using for these events more than 4 or 5 times.
Yeah. Did you ever hear about Matt Denif's Everesting that he did before writing the book on Everesting?
I know he did one.
And the computer the head unit he used, I'd given him a head unit, a Lezyne, because it had excellent battery life, and I had like a very basic computer, but I'd found it to be reliable for a couple of years, and I'm like, here you go, I'm not using it. It has exceptional battery life. It's a very simple unit. It crashed and lost the file mid-Everesting. But he had friends and family, like, doing lap count and stuff, so he was fine, but definitely a stress you don't need. So sorry, Matt.
And Zach, you were saying you wouldn't use a new computer to you or a new head unit to you, but when I did my Everestings, I was using a device that I had for years, and it was still a major concern. And to the point that subsequent events I've done since, people always ask me why you wearing 2 watches, and one of the watches is tracking the ride as in combination with the head unit that's tracking the ride, so there's a backup, and you shouldn't have to do that. It shouldn't be a concern.
I mean, it feels like computer companies just keep trying to add more and more features rather than
improving the experience.
Does it record the ride? Does it upload the ride? Do we have those things dialed before we do any other features? But
yeah, we're straying into another on your mind.
Yeah.
Yes, very much so. I think that isn't on your mind. So anyway, we'll call it there. It's a long episode, but there's more for those that want to stick around. Those that are members of Escape Collective, you now have a Ask a Wrench segment to hang around for. You will, of course, need to be on the member-only feed of Geek Warning or the Escape Collective Podcast Network. If you're not already a member, then please head to escapecollective.com/join. Become a member, support everything we do at Escape Collective, get access to everything we create, and it's just a few easy steps to get onto the member-only podcast feed. It's worth it, I promise. For this week from Ask a Wrench, you're going to hear Brad Copeland and I answer some questions related to dyno plugs and tubeless tire plugs and whether you can keep riding said tires. We talk about some different applications of drip wax lube and what to do, what not to do. And we talk about something about squealing Shimano brakes and what happens when your brakes that you haven't touched for a little while just all of a sudden start making noise. So plenty to listen to and plenty to learn from, but that one's for members only. So if you're not on the members feed, hope you enjoyed the episode. You'll hear from us again next week, and for those that are, enjoy the next little bit. Cheers.